Good morning, everybody. The Crazy Bearded Christian coming at you. We are on our way to work again, and we have a little bit of a surprise for you this morning. Instead of you focusing on me in the video, you are going to be watching my dash cam as I'm traveling to work. Maybe we'll see something exciting, maybe not. But needless to say, the point for this is for you to focus and relax and to focus really on what I'm telling you and not on my face. And so that's probably a benefit for everybody. And so we're going to travel this way, and you get to kind of see what I get to see on my way to work. But more importantly, hope this gives you an opportunity to kind of relax, enjoy the scenery, and, just kind of get to listen to what's going on. And so we have been talking about spiritual discernment. Now, the last video that we spoke about, we kind of went into a little bit what spiritual discernment is. And probably one of the best ways for me to tell you what spiritual discernment actually is to use the idea of a radio. And so when you're looking for your favorite Christian station, or maybe you listen to rock, the good kind, or maybe you listen to country music, whatever it is you listen to, you have to tune your radio dial, or now fancy, you hit the button, and go to the specific radio station that you're looking for. And it's not just important to do that, but then you have to be within the proximity, within the area. You have to be in the right place to get reception, right? Well, with God, in spiritual discernment, in order to communicate effectively with God, not only do you have to be focused on God, tune into God, but you also have to listen. You have to put in the effort. You have to talk to Him. You have to kind of get yourself in a position to where you can hear from God. Now, you will not always hear from God verbally. You may not even hear from God through your mind. Sometimes it's tugging on your heart. Sometimes it's pulling in your ears, God don't tickle your ears like some people want to be, have their ears tickled just so they can hear what they want to hear. But you can count on God to tell you what you need to hear, or to put in your path what you need to hear or what you need. And so with spiritual discernment, we're really focused on a couple of things. One, what is God trying to tell you? Number two, is it from God? Maybe we should reverse them. Is it from God? And if so, what is He trying to tell you? And so I want to give you a little bit of an antidote this morning. And so if you like to title things, or if you like to have labels, I'm going to be talking about at least one antidote from my personal life involving spiritual discernment. And guys, I'm not going to sugarcoat this. This is going to be kind of wild what I talk about. This is going to be very interesting. And if you're not into all of this spirituality, as people like to label it, you think it's like voodoo, then you may not want to listen to this. But if you're intrigued about those things spiritual, about God, and about how God operates, then stay tuned. All right, so here we go. This title for this video is The Creek and the Fire. Now, yeah, maybe, you think about the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. No, this is The Creek and the Fire. It's not as exciting as the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. But this is pretty exciting in its own right. And this goes way, way, way back to when I was in high school. You see, I was in church. I was following God. Probably not as well as I should, but a lot better than I had been at certain points in my life. And so I felt like I was fairly in tune with God. And what I mean by that is I felt like I communicated pretty regularly, and I heard from God pretty regularly as far as what He had for me in my life, when He would tug on my heart in obedience. And so in this one particular instance, I was outside. My brother and I were hanging out. I got two brothers. I don't remember what the other one was at this point. But two of us, we were outside. We had this bonfire going that my dad had started. And this fire had been built toward the edge of a creek. And, we're from Kentucky, and so a lot of times what we would do is we would burn things outside, and then we would get rid of that in that manner. Because when you live way, 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 way out in the boonies, we call it, for those of you that are not from Kentucky or you don't know what a holler is, because we did live up a holler too, the boonies is those places that you go where people say the boogeyman and Bigfoot live. I'm just kidding. And so, anyway, we lived up this holler, or this hollow, for those of you that are proper, and we were getting rid of some wood and some things like that. Well, this day in particular, a old wooden piece of furniture got thrown on the fire, and it was fairly large, and it had a lot of material on it and stuff. And thinking about today, it's probably one of those things you maybe shouldn't burn outside or burn at all. Maybe you should just have somebody pick it up, and that's a smart thing to do. Well, back then we didn't really pay attention as much to things that maybe you should do, right? And remember, if you read Romans, Paul's pretty clear about telling you that, you need to obey authorities, and that includes any law that does not contradict God's law. And the reason for that is because authority is of God. And so that's my take on that one. I'm just saying, be careful what you do. But I digress. Anyway, so we were burning this piece of furniture along with some other bits of material, and the fire got pretty big. Like it was a bonfire. It's a kind of a cool hangout fire. Not something you want to cook over, but something you can kind of relax by. And I was walking around, and I was looking around, and my younger brother, my middle brother, he was hanging out in the creek just below the bonfire. And to get this picture, let me see if I can paint a middle picture for you. Imagine that you have a bonfire, and it is about maybe 4 feet away from the creek, and then the creek, there is a creek bank that contains the water and the rocks and all the habitat of the creek. Well, with this creek bank in particular, so imagine we're like 3 or 4 feet from the creek bank, maybe 5, and it goes down an embankment or the creek bank by another like 5 or 6 feet. So it's it's not a real deep creek, and the water in there was only like 6 inches deep. It wasn't anything major. And so there's a small creek with this fire next to it, and the idea is that if something happened and it started to get out of control, you can throw water on it. This fire was raging. My brother was playing in this creek, and I was walking by, and I'm looking at this whole set of circumstances, right? Nothing out of the normal for hillbillies in Kentucky. So I was looking at the creek, looking at the fire, looking at my brother, and I was kind of having one of those moments where I believe I was meditating on God. So even though I was walking around, I'm alert. I wasn't sitting there with my pointer finger and my thumb touching each other, cross-legged, going, oh. No, it wasn't anything like that. That's not how I meditate on God. But if you do that, I guess that's okay. And so I was walking around, just kind of had God on my mind, had God in my thoughts. And I was kind of focusing on God. And then something happened. Now, guys, remember that part I told you about, that some things with God are, it can be a little bit of an experience? Well, this was an experience. This was the first time, and I'm pretty sure the last time it's ever happened to me, at least to date. So I was looking at the bonfire, and then all of a sudden in my mind, I saw, and it was weird to explain, it's hard to put into words, I saw the piece of furniture on top of the fire that was fully engulfed, raging fire, roll toward the creek. And then I was like, whoa, what's going on? But here's the kicker. Then, after I saw that, I yelled at my brother to get out of the way. And he looked at me like, what? And then, as he was moving out of the way, the piece of furniture on top of the fire began, here's the key word, began to roll toward the creek. You're like, no, wait a minute, what are you saying here? Do you have a premonition? No, I don't believe it was a premonition. I don't necessarily believe in premonitions. But what I do believe in is prophecy. And sometimes, there's prophecy, there's biblical prophecy of things that's going to happen in the Bible, but God can also give you warnings. And sometimes those warnings may allow you to see things before they happen. Now, has it happened since? No. Not that I can recall. Because I think I would remember if it did. Because that was it stood out pretty big. But I saw that piece of furniture that was on fire roll toward the creek, toward my brother, before it ever began to move in that direction. Like literally in my vision, and that's the key word here, I saw it moving and rolling before it ever began to budge. And I was able to warn my brother to get out of the way before this fireball of furniture came toppling down on him. And he did. And he was not hurt. He was not injured. He wasn't even touched by the smoke. And I think that's pretty awesome to see how God works. And so, we have to think, has God warned anybody in the Bible? Can you think of any situation right now to where God has given a warning to somebody of future events to occur and for them to heed that warning? I can think of two specific events right off of the top of my head. And one of those events would be with the wise men, and when God instructed them to not return the way in which they had come because Herod was looking to find Jesus. Another example, and you'll have to forgive me because I cannot remember the name for the life of me, would be when the prophet was instructed to go a certain path, but another prophet had this man go this other path, and he was eaten by a wild animal. You probably remember the story. Like I said, I can't remember all of the stories. You know, as a minister, you're not required to remember everything, but it is in there, and maybe I'll find that verse and put it in here, attach it to the video. And so, with all of that being said, God does give us warnings about future events, and the way and the means that God chooses to do that is up to God. But it is each and every time our responsibility to respond. Now I'm going to tell you another one, and if you want a title for this one, we're going to title this one Just Go, or The Message. And so with this one was pretty exciting. I was pretty excited about this. We were standing in church, and we were focusing on God. We had a time of prayer, as we did in this particular church. Now, a lot of churches, the time of prayer is a corporate prayer in which somebody in the front, sometimes it's the minister, maybe it's an elder, a deacon, whomever, will stand up and they'll lead the entire congregation in a word of prayer. Well, this particular church that I went to at the time, we had individual time of prayer, but it was a time for everybody to be praying, but it wasn't the same prayers, if that makes sense. That may be a foreign concept to a lot of people, depending on the denomination of church that you attend. I don't associate with a denomination. I'm a Jesus freak. And so, as we were praying our different prayers and meditating on the Lord, I looked over at my aunt. Now, my aunt, she did some missionary work, and this was early on when she was really dabbling in figuring out if God had called her into mission work. And so she was really struggling with this, but here's the thing, I didn't know that. All I know is I was praying to the Lord, and as I was praying to the Lord, this thought popped into my mind. Now, if you've ever had that happen, it's kind of interesting because it can be kind of perplexing, not confusing, but just kind of throw you off guard a little bit. And so I'm praying, I don't even remember what I was praying about, and all of a sudden, I have this voice that it was almost like a loudspeaker went off in my brain. It overrode every thought, every word, and all it said was, tell her to go. And I'm like, that might come off kind of rude if I go tell her that. And so I'm like, Lord, is that you? You know, it's kind of like, so it's almost like somebody had knocked on your door and then you go to open it because you kind of recognize the voice, but you've never heard the voice before. You know, it's familiar, but you don't exactly know. And I'm like, Lord, is that you? And so I began to pray a little bit more and kind of brushed it off. Like, oh, that's no big deal. And then I hear, tell her to go. And so I was like, okay. I was like, Lord, who are you talking about? And it kind of almost like I was playing games with God, So I looked around, and then I looked at my Aunt Frankie. Hopefully she don't mind me using her name. And she was still praying. And then I said, and I hear the words again in my brain, tell her to go. But it was softer, more gentle, but stern. It was authoritative. I said, yes, Lord. If I hear from you, I believe it was 3 times is what it took. Probably 2 times too long. I went over and kind of scratched my head. And I looked at her and said, Aunt Frankie, and mind you, I'm a teenager at this time. I said, I don't know why I'm supposed to tell you this, but I'm going to tell you this because I feel like I'm supposed to. And she goes, what is it? And my Aunt Frankie's like 12 years older than me, so she was probably in her 20s at the time. And I said, I'm supposed to tell you to go. I don't know where. I said, I don't know where I'm supposed to tell you to go, but just to go. And she hugged me, and she began to cry. And I said, okay. Like, I didn't know what I had done, All I know that I had been obedient to the voice in my head. Now, let me stop you there for just a second. There's a difference between God speaking to you, in which you will know, and then voices that you need to get help with. Just let me put that out there, okay? So, you don't necessarily want to listen to every voice in your head, and we'll get into that a little bit later too. But anyway, so I told her to go, and she reacted as if a weight had been taken off of her shoulders, or if she had received something that she had been looking for, that she had desperately been looking for. Well, what I found out is because I told her to go, and it wasn't because I told her, it was because the message that God had given me to relay to her, the messenger, right? The message. She had been praying and asking God to let her know, let her to know what to do in regards to going on a certain mission trip. Like, I'm pretty sure this would have been her first mission trip that she would win. And I'm not talking like going to South Dakota, which is all fine. Those are good mission trips. I'm talking about like going to Mexico or Honduras, something of that, something of that type of extent. And God had told her to go, but He didn't tell her directly. You see, sometimes God will put 2 people on the same path and use one as the messenger and one as the recipient, but both are blessed by God. Isn't that amazing how God does that? Isn't that amazing how God works in those mysterious ways, but it works in such effect that it affects a lot of people, right? And so I went and told her that, and she went on the mission trip. And it was the reports that I got and the pictures that I saw was just amazing what God did on that mission trip. And it really humbles you to think about what would have happened if I had not told her to go. Well, here's what I think would have happened. God would have told somebody else until somebody was obedient. But because I was obedient, I was blessed by the Lord. And we hear that term thrown around a lot of times in Christian circles, let the Lord bless you, be blessed. And that's something I want to explore a little bit, but not right now, because as you can see, I am pulling in to work. And so here's what I have to say to you this day. Spiritual discernment, or those things spiritual with God, are real. They do happen. They're not always as grand as we may think that they are, but they're always awesome because you are communicating with God. And so I leave you with this thought this morning. Be obedient and faithful to God and see what God does to you. And remember, there's nothing wrong with listening to the voice of God. God bless you all. Have a good